You know the thing about most phone brands aren't shy about taking inspiration from others? Well, this time, I think Tecno just did it right. Because this, the Tecno Spark Slim, feels like what I would call an affordable iPhone Air. Now, before you say anything, hear me out. It's not bad per se. If you're going to copy a better product, at least copy the good things. And in this case, it's the design. That crazy, thin, and sleek iPhone Air inspired look. Except Tecno did at a fraction of a price. 229 US dollars in the US, 9,499 in the Philippines, 180 euros in Europe, and 16,999 rupees in India. And yes, with that price, you're bound to see some drawbacks, especially when it comes to performance in cameras. But here's the thing. Tecno did something bold here. They put most of the cost to manufacture into the design. And honestly, it worked. Because this phone doesn't feel budget at all when you're holding it. At 5.93mm, Tecno calls this the world's slimmest 3D curved phone. And that's without counting the camera hump, of course. The iPhone Air still wins at 5.6mm. In fact, it's so thin it almost feels like one of those local goods. Otap. That's honestly the best way I can describe it. You hold it, and it's so light, so wafer thin, it almost feels like it could snap in half if you press too hard. Now, jokes aside, at just 156 grams, it is incredibly light. And while Tecno does include a slim plastic case in the box, I have to say, it just doesn't feel right. You're adding thickness to a phone that's supposed to be all about being thin. Inside the box, you'll find the usual, a manual, USB-C cable, SIM ejector, and that slim clear case. Pretty standard stuff. But it's what's on the phone itself that deserves more attention. The back is made of fiberglass, which, when you look it up, is basically fiber reinforced plastic using glass fiber. Sounds sketchy, but in practice, it feels smooth, kind of like frosted glass. Definitely does not scream plastic budget phone. What I also appreciate is how seamless the back wraps around the steel frame. You don't feel any sharp edges when you hold it. The buttons, though thin, are still clicky and responsive. On the right side, you've got your volume and power buttons. Up top, an IR blaster and a small speaker that works with the bottom one for that Dolby Atmos dual speaker setup. You also get dual SIM support, though no expandable storage this time. At the bottom, there's the USB-C port, a mic, and the main speaker. Now let's talk battery, because this is where Tecno did something impressive. You're getting a 5160 mAh battery that charges at 45 watts. Tecno claims it goes from empty to full in 57 minutes. But here's the stat that really caught my attention. They're saying the battery will retain 80% capacity after 1,800 plus full charge cycles, or about 5 years of daily charging. That's crazy ambitious for a budget phone. And even though it doesn't have wireless charging, it does support reverse wired charging up to 10 watts. You can even tweak the charging behavior in the settings, like setting charge limits or checking your current battery health. All in all, it's genuinely impressive how thin this thing is without feeling fragile. And yes, it also got IP54 dust and splash resistance, which adds a bit more peace of mind. Now let's talk about that display, because I can confidently say Tecno did not cut corners here. This is a 6.78-inch curved AMOLED panel with a 1.5K resolution, an adaptive refresh rate up to 144Hz, and a peak brightness that hits 4500 nits in HDR mode. Now, that number obviously refers to specific HDR scenarios, but even in regular outdoor use, it reaches 1600 nits in high brightness mode, and that's honestly more than enough for harsh sunlight. One feature that actually surprised me is something called Wet Touch, which lets the screen respond even when your hands are damp. Not a big deal for everyone, but if you've ever tried using your phone right after washing your hands, you know how annoying that can be. At the same time, I'm not sure if that's something worth highlighting. Anyway, about the resolution, Tecno says it's 1.5K, but technically it's an upscale 2400 by 1080 panel using their Tecno T1 chip. There is even a small disclaimer about it on their website, but honestly, in real-world use, it still looks sharp and detailed, definitely not your typical 1080p screen. There's also an always-on display, though it's not quite always on, it stays visible for about 5 seconds when you tap the screen, so yeah, more like a sometimes on display. Still, I'll take it. And despite the curved edges, I haven't experienced any accidental palm touches yet. Also worth mentioning, the front is protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 7i, which Tecno says is twice as resistant to drops and scratches compared to Gorilla Glass 5. It's even military standard 810H certified, which is impressive for this price range. So durability shouldn't be an issue here. Now let's address the elephant in the room, performance. This is where you start to see the budget side of things. It's powered by the MediaTek Helio G200 with 8GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. On paper, that looks decent for the price. But in practice, it's clear where they had to make compromises. The G series from MediaTek used to be impressive. Remember the Helio G90 back in 2019? That thing was great for its time. But it's 2025 now, and when you look at benchmarks between the G90 and the G200, the difference is minimal at best. And I felt that right away. Despite the 144Hz display, the experience doesn't really feel 144Hz. Animations, transitions, and general responsiveness just don't keep up. It feels like a 90Hz phone most of the time, even when everything's set to max refresh rate. If you've been using flagship phones or even decent mid-range devices, you'll notice it immediately. But, and this is important, if you're upgrading from a cheap entry-level phone, you will feel the difference. It's faster, smoother, and more responsive than the usual cheap entry-level phones. Still, the chipset feels like it's holding the display back. I don't know what MediaTek is doing with these rebranded G-series chips, but it's kind of frustrating to see them slap new model names and with almost no real performance improvements. And yeah, it gets the job done for daily use, social media, light gaming, videos, but don't expect anything extraordinary. That said, I'll be saving my full performance breakdown for my upcoming full review, so make sure you're subscribed for that. Now onto the cameras. There's only one main camera on the back, a 50-megapixel sensor and a 13-megapixel selfie camera up front. You might notice that there are two sensors in the back, but the one on the left is the main shooter, while the other seems to be a depth sensor, although I'm not really sure. And then Tecno also added something called the mood light design. LEDs are on the camera module that light up in certain situations. You can customize them to react when charging, getting notifications or calls, triggering voice assistant, or even as a low battery reminder. It's a nice touch that adds to the phone's personality and overall aesthetic. However, when it comes to photo and video specs, it's a bit underwhelming. Videos can go up to 2K 30 frames for both front and back, but there is no stabilization for the main camera unless you drop down to 1080p. And yeah, you're missing an ultra-wide sensor, so framing options are limited. I want to go back for a bit and talk about how this phone makes me feel when I'm using it. You know, in the budget phone world, design is usually the last thing that gets attention. But Tecno flipped that script. The Spark Slim doesn't just look premium, it feels premium. That thin profile changes how you handle it. It's super comfortable to hold, easy to slide into pockets, and surprisingly solid despite how thin it is. Even small things like the curve of the glass and the texture of the back give it a more expensive feel than it really is. I would even say this is one of the few phones that feels different the moment you pick it up, and that's not something you can say about most budget devices. Sure, the internals could use a boost, and the camera system isn't groundbreaking either, but for a phone at this price range, Tecno deserves credit. They made something that looks and feels premium, and that alone is a win for a lot of users who care about style and form factor. So yeah, Tecno just made an affordable iPhone Air, and I say that with full respect, because this is what happens when a brand focuses on what really makes a product feel premium: design, materials, and user experience. For its price, the Spark Slim delivers a slim, elegant body that feels way beyond its price tag. Sure, performance isn't its strong suit, and the cameras might just be average. But if you value aesthetics, lightness, and comfort in a daily phone, this is easily one of the most interesting budget releases this year. And let's be real, you're not going to find another phone that's this thin, this light, and this stylish anywhere near its price point. Now, I'll be spending more time with the Spark Slim in the next few days, so stay tuned for my full review. Do you think it's smart for brands to focus on thinness again in 2025? Or would you rather have the same thick phones with more power and battery life? I mean, you don't have to buy it, you just get more options. That's it for this one. Drop a sub or like if you feel like supporting the channel. And as always, until the next one, Stay safe.